Welcome to the debate. Imagine for a moment that a master architect draws up the blueprints for this, soaring, intricate Gothic cathedral.
Okay.
And every flying buttress, every stained glass window is just meticulously detailed in the schematics, right? It's designed to capture and refract light in a very specific, divine way. But when the automated construction crew is actually dispatched to build it, they end up pouring a square concrete bunker.
Wow.
Yeah. So the question is, where does the true identity of that building live? Is it in the brilliant, soulful intention on the paper? Or is it, in the cold, undeniable concrete that you can actually touch?
It is a phenomenal question. Because ultimately you cannot seek shelter from the rain inside a blueprint. You have to actually live in the concrete.
Right. And that exact tension brings us to our focus today. We are looking at the fundamental divide between human intent and machine execution, specifically in the realm of AI-generated art.
It is such a fascinating divide.
It really is, and we are examining this through two primary documents that basically bookend the AI music creation process. On one side, we have the AI creation prompt. This is the original, prescriptive instruction given to the machine. It's the intended design, the blueprint, basically.
Right.
And on the other side, we have the AI song interpretation. And this is a descriptive reconstruction generated by a separate analytical AI. It just listens to the finished audio and logs what it hears. So this is the perceived reality of the final product.
Yeah, to put it simply, it is the difference between what the machine was explicitly told to do and what a machine actually perceives was done when the whole rendering is finished.
Exactly, and we have a perfectly documented case study today to explore this divergence. It is a piece titled Tango and Danwaku, which translates to Tango and Time.
Yes.
When we look at these two documents side by side, the prompt and the interpretation, we see this massive, almost staggering gulf between the initial human instruction and the final machine generation. So today, I am going to argue that the AI creation prompt, the prescriptive human intent, holds the true artistic identity and cultural essence of this work, even if the machine's execution completely falters.
And I will be taking the opposing view. I'm arguing that the AI song interpretation, the descriptive, empirical reality of the generated audio is the undeniable truth of the song. In my view, the final audio renders that original prompt as merely a discarded, unrealized fantasy.
Well, let me begin by establishing just how much profound cultural depth was intended for Tango and Waktu. Because when you read the AI creation prompt, you aren't just reading like a list of instruments or a basic tempo marking.
Sure.
You are reading a meticulously crafted artistic vision. The prompt specifically calls for a cinematic world music fusion. It asks the AI to blend the melancholic Argentine Bandoneon, an instrument that essentially carries the very soul and history of tango, with the traditional Indonesian Suling, which is a delicate bamboo flute.
Right. It's very specific.
It is. This is designed to be a dialogue between two incredibly rich, completely distinct musical worlds.
The ambition in the prompt is certainly undeniable. It is a beautiful concept on paper.
And it is deeply specific too. The prompt prescribes rich minor key progressions, specifically singling out D minor to evoke this sense of deep sorrow and nostalgia. It demands a syncopated 4/4 tango beat, but infused with gentle kendang percussion.
The Indonesian drum, right?
Exactly. The kendang is an Indonesian double-headed drum, and here it is meant to create a tense, ticking clock sensation that mirrors the unstoppable flow of time. And on top of all that, it explicitly asks for the vocal delivery to express Javanese emotional depth, a concept known as Rasa.
Right.
But these instructions constitute the actual artistic soul of the piece. The human creator envisioned this breathtaking synthesis of South American sorrow and Javanese spirituality. The AI's role was merely to execute this highly specific, culturally nuanced human vision. That intention, that brilliant synthesis, that is the art.
I come at it from a different way. I hear the beauty in that description, I really do. But we have to look at the stark empirical reality of the audio that was actually produced.
But you can't just ignore the intent.
You can have all the beautiful intentions in the world, But if we look at the AI song interpretation, which is an objective descriptive analysis of the finished audio file, we are presented with a completely different song. The final audio is not a melancholic tango fusion. The interpretation definitively categorizes the audible result as an Indonesian pop ballad.
But that categorization completely ignores the complex fusion that was requested in the prompts.
It ignores it because that fusion simply isn't there in the final product. I mean, if a listener puts on their headphones, they are not hearing a sparse, syncopated tango beat driven by traditional kendang drums.
Well, the interpretation explicitly logs that the drums utilize a standard pop kit with prominent crash cymbals and a driving kick snare pattern in the choruses. The tempo is clocked at a very standard 72 beats per minute.
Sure, the tempo is standard, but
If it walks like a pop ballad and has the driving kick snare of a pop ballad and uses the crash cymbals of a pop ballad, it is objectively a pop ballad. The prompt's intention, however culturally rich, is entirely irrelevant if the audible result completely diverges from it. The truth of a song lives in the speaker cone, not in the text box. I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. Let's look closer at that divergence, specifically regarding the musical architecture and genre. You mentioned it became a pop ballad, but I want to focus on the harmony. The prompt explicitly demanded D minor.
Yes, it did. The text says, rich minor key progressions to evoke deep nostalgia. And yet, what does the AI interpretation log? It objectively states the finished song is in the key of D major.
Right.
This is perhaps the most glaring empirical discrepancy we have. The jump from D minor to D major is not a subtle stylistic shift. It changes the entire emotional vocabulary of the piece, from sorrowful and tense to triumphant, or at least, conventionally bright and resolved.
But I think we need to view this through the lens of,
You cannot claim the artistic truth of the song is a melancholic minor key tango when the literal frequencies vibrating in the air are a major key pop progression.
okay, but think about the realm of classical music for a second. Imagine a human orchestra receives a brilliant, complex score from a legendary composer. It is intricate, it is demanding, it is full of specific cultural markers.
okay, I'm following.
Now imagine during the performance, the string section plays slightly out of tune or the conductor severely misinterprets the time signature, fundamentally shifting the feel of the piece. Has the composition itself changed?
No.
The composition, the true identity of the work, remains the score. Only the execution has failed. In Tango and Waktu, the intended D minor tango framework, with all its cultural cross-pollination, is the true composition. The generative AI simply gave a deeply flawed performance of a brilliant score.
I understand the orchestra analogy, but we aren't talking about a violinist missing a single accidental and turning a minor chord major for one beat. We are talking about a fundamental rewriting of the musical DNA.
Is it really that fundamental, though?
Yes. Let's stick with your orchestra analogy and look at the instrumentation. The prompt explicitly asked for a dialogue between a melancholic Bandoneon and an Indonesian Suling. It was supposed to be this delicate conversation between Argentina and Indonesia. But when we look at the descriptive interpretation of what actually happens in the bridge, the AI inserted a distorted electric guitar solo over an orchestral backing.
I'll admit, the electric guitar hallucination is the hardest part of my argument to defend. It is completely bizarre given the prompt.
It is beyond bizarre. It is a complete structural rewrite. You cannot simply excuse a roaring, distorted electric guitar as a poorly executed bandoneon.
Fair enough, but
A conductor misinterpreting a time signature is human error. An AI dropping an arena rock guitar solo into what was supposed to be a sparse, mystical gamelan and bandoneon interlude, that is the creation of a fundamentally new, different piece of art.
But why did it do that? Even if we treat the guitar as a catastrophic glitch, we can't ignore the intent that drove the generation process in the first place.
If you're listening to this and wondering how a highly advanced machine can confuse a delicate bamboo flute with a roaring electric guitar, it is important to realize the generative AI isn't listening to music the way we do. It is predicting math.
Right.
Generative AI models are trained on massive, incredibly vast data sets of audio, and those data sets are heavily weighted toward Western pop music because that is what is most prevalent on the internet.
Right. The statistical gravity of the training data pulls the output toward the most common denominator.
Exactly. When the algorithm reaches the bridge of a song and its internal architecture calculates the mathematical probability that a climax is needed at this timestamp, it regresses to the mean. It doesn't rebel against the prompt. It just defaults to the most statistically probable audio token for a musical climax in its dataset, which happens to be a distorted electric guitar.
Sure.
But the mechanism doesn't change the outcome. That statistical regression, the pop drums, the D major key, the electric guitar, is the only art that actually exists for the listener to consume.
Okay. But if we accept that the musical architecture was mathematically pulled toward Western pop, we have to talk about what that shift does to the lyrics and, more importantly, the intended emotion.
And go on.
Because the AI didn't just overwrite the musical architecture. That shift to a major key completely sabotages the lyrics.
You mean the bracketed text in the original prompt?
Yes. The lyrics provided in the creation prompt are not just raw words. They are heavily annotated with structural directions. In the second verse, the prompt specifically instructs that the vocal should express Javanese emotional depth, Rasa, carrying longing without exaggeration.
Right.
It is a very specific, understated, highly spiritual kind of emotion. The bridge was designed to be a moment where Angin Barat bertemu Lemba, Timur, the west wind, meets the eastern valley. The prompt instructed the AI to keep the harmony in D minor to create tension before two invisible voices merge into a shared memory. You cannot sing about the deep, understated longing of Javanese Rasa over a triumphant pop progression. That friction, that profound cultural nuance requested in the text is the absolute artistic core of Tango and Waktu.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. Look at the interpreted lyrics file. All of those beautiful structural notes you just mentioned. The invisible voices merging, the ticking sensation of unstoppable time, the understated longing. They are completely gone from the final audio.
They are absent from the transcription, yes.
They are absent from the physical sound waves. Look at what replaced that delicate Javanese Rasa. In the descriptive file for the verse 2 transition, it just logs drums drop to halftime, piano and strings.
Well,
And when we hit that bridge where the west wind is supposed to meet the eastern valley in a subtle merge of invisible voices, the AI interpreter simply logs a crescendo and powerful vocals. Asking an AI trained on top 40 hits to synthesize authentic Javanese Rasa is like running a profound, culturally specific poem through Google Translate back and forth 10 times.
that's a bit of an exaggeration.
Is it? You lose the idioms, you lose the soul, and you're left with a literal statistical average. The machine flattened the emotion into the most generic, paint-by-numbers Western pop tropes imaginable. It replaced understated Javanese longing with a melodramatic pop crescendo.
But that flattening you were describing, the Google Translate effect, is exactly why the prompt must be recognized as the true artistic identity.
How so?
Because the machine's inability to comprehend the subtleties of Rasa doesn't mean the concept is erased from the work's conception. The art exists in the attempt to bridge those cultures. In the poetic instructions themselves, the failure of the machine actually highlights the depth of the human intention.
But art requires a medium. I mean, if I intend to paint a masterpiece that perfectly captures the varied greens of a spring forest, but I only have a bucket of gray paint, my intention doesn't change the fact that the canvas is just gray. The machine flattened the emotion, and therefore the emotion of the actual song is flat. You can read the prompt and imagine a beautiful, rich, culturally nuanced song in your head. But that song does not exist in reality. The pop ballad does.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning, because I have to challenge this absolute blind faith you are placing in the AI song interpretation file. You are treating the descriptive AI as if it is an infallible, omniscient music critic. Let's look at the source material's definitions again. It states clearly that the AI song interpretation is just a reconstruction based on what the AI perceives was created.
And what it perceives is an empirical analysis of the audio frequencies. It is quite literally measuring the sound.
Yes, but we have to remember the AI song interpretation is essentially a transcription bot, an audio classification model, and classification models have strict limitations in their training data, just like generative models do.
Okay.
They categorize sound waves based on strict, usually Western-centric labels. What if the generative AI did actually manage to create a complex, subtle fusion of Argentine tango phrasing and Javanese gamelan tuning? The analytical AI listening to it might simply lack the vocabulary to categorize something that avant-garde.
Wait, you're saying the descriptive AI just didn't understand what it was hearing?
Exactly. If it hears a complex Argentine-Indonesian polyrhythm it has never been trained on, it doesn't have a label for that in its Gamelanbase, so it panics and lazily slaps the closest approximation it can find on it. Indonesian pop ballad.
I see.
It hears percussion it doesn't understand and just logs standard pop kit. The intent, the rasa, the minor key tension, the cultural fusion, might actually be present in the audio in some avant-garde form, but it is completely missed by the descriptive AI's rigid categorization algorithms.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered that we aren't just talking about a subtle mistranslation of genre or a misunderstood polyrhythm? We have to consider the explicit mandate of the descriptive file. The source material tells us that the interpretation is an independent analysis of the generated audio and should reflect the audible result, including any differences between the original intention and the final generation.
Right, it is supposed to catch the differences.
And it catches them, because acoustic markers are highly distinct. A crash cymbal has a very specific acoustic signature. It's a wash of high frequencies that completely fills the sonic space. It behaves nothing like a kendang drum.
Sure, sonically speaking.
And an electric guitar running through a distortion pedal has a dense harmonic waveform that is mathematically impossible to confuse with the airy, breathy frequencies of a wooden bamboo flute. If the descriptive AI logs a driving kick snare pattern and crash cymbals instead of a sparse acoustic piano and kendang, that is the audible reality.
I still think
It is not a failure of vocabulary. It is a documentation of physical sound waves. The analytical AI isn't lazily calling a bandoneon an electric guitar. It is reporting the presence of an electric guitar because the generative AI in its regression to the mean hallucinated one into the track.
Okay, let's assume you're entirely right about the acoustic reality. Even if we accept the undeniable presence of the electric guitar or the major key or the pop drums, you are treating the generated audio as a closed system. But human listeners don't consume AI art in a vacuum.
What do you mean?
Well, in the modern landscape, the prompt, the text, the instructions, the lyrics, with their rich structural annotations, often accompanies the piece. It is presented alongside the audio. The listener reads the title, Tango Danwaku, they read the instructions for Javanese Rasa, and they hold that in their mind while listening to the AI's flawed pop ballad execution. The gap between the two, the friction between human depth and machine flattening, that becomes the art itself.
Let's be clear about what that actually means. You're now arguing that the art isn't the song, but the meta-experience of the machine's failure to make the song.
I'm arguing that you cannot divorce the resulting audio from the prescriptive command that birthed it. The prompt is the DNA. If the DNA mutates heavily during gestation because of statistical anomalies in the machine's training data, the resulting organism is still defined by its relationship to that original genetic code. You only understand how strange the electric guitar is because you know it was supposed to be a bamboo flute.
But you are assuming every listener has the blueprint in front of them. If a listener tunes in on the radio or hits a random playlist and hears Tango Danwaku without the benefit of reading your brilliant, heavily annotated prompt, what do they experience?
Well,
They experience a 72 beat per minute D major pop song with a slightly out-of-place guitar solo and some traditional instruments layered quietly in the background. They don't experience the unfulfilled promise of a minor key Argentine-Indonesian dialogue. They don't hear the ghost of Javanese Rasa. They experience the empirical reality of the generated file. To say the prompt is the true art is to say the menu is the meal. You can read a beautiful description of a dish, but if the kitchen serves you something completely different, you still have to eat what's on the plate.
I would modify that metaphor. I would say the prompt is the recipe. And if a robotic chef fundamentally misunderstands the recipe, if it replaces delicate saffron with cheap yellow food coloring because yellow food coloring is statistically more common in its database, the resulting dish is a failure. It doesn't set a new standard for the recipe, it just proves the chef failed.
But the failed dish is the only thing sitting on the table.
True. But as we look at these two documents, the intent and the execution, we are essentially looking at the ghost and the machine. My position remains that the profound cultural synthesis and prescriptive instructions in the prompt, the demand for a D minor tango, the subtle Javanese Rasa, the delicate dialogue between East and West, they remain the defining artistic truth of Tango and Waktu. The machine's mathematical inability to fully execute that vision due to its training weights does not invalidate the vision itself. The prompt is where the human soul of the work resides.
And my position remains that art is fundamentally an empirical, phenomenological experience. The blueprint is not the building, and the recipe is not the meal. If the finished, audible audio vibrating the speakers is a D major pop ballad driven by crash cymbals and a distorted electric guitar, then the original intent, no matter how culturally rich or conceptually brilliant, is just a fascinating but ultimately unrealized fantasy. The machine's output is the only tangible reality we have to evaluate.
Well, despite our different frameworks and our disagreement on where the core identity of the art lies, I think we both have to acknowledge the remarkable and frankly somewhat haunting gap between human instruction and machine execution that this case study reveals.
Absolutely. Tango and Waktu is a perfect illustration of how an AI can take highly specific cultural instructions, things that carry centuries of human weight, like tango phrasing or Javanese emotional depth, and synthesize them into something entirely unexpected and sometimes entirely generic. It exposes the mechanical nature of generative models in a very stark way.
It really forces us to ask what it means to actually understand a musical culture. Does the AI understand the sorrow of the Bandoneon? Does it comprehend the spiritual restraint of Rasa? Or does it just mathematically associate those words with certain sonic tokens that it then readily overwrites with an electric guitar when the algorithm calculates a structural need for a climax?
Which is exactly why looking at both documents side by side, as we have today, is the only way to truly understand current state of AI generation. You cannot simply listen to the audio. You have to see the instruction to understand the magnitude of the machine's deviation. You have to see the blueprint to realize why the bunker is so disappointing.
There's certainly much more to explore in this material, particularly regarding how AI models process, flatten, or mishandle cross-cultural musical traditions. It is a technological frontier that is as exciting as it is deeply unpredictable.
And it is deeply revealing about our own assumptions regarding creativity, control, and the limits of language in programming a machine to feel.
Indeed. We've laid out the blueprints, and we've walked through the concrete bunker. We've explored the complex math behind the machine's generation and its analysis, whether the true art lives in the brilliant intention on the paper or in the undeniable reality you can actually hear. Well, that is something the listener will have to decide for themselves.